We have discussion comprehensive assessment system in our last meeting. I appreciate all of you work about tests and non-test assessment. You have done a great job on that, and congratulations lots. All of your work have been accepted. You can clap your hands. Today we will talk about validity and reliability. The session objectives. The purpose of this session is first to define validity and reliability. The second part, the distinguish between valid and invalid inferences. And the last, to understand how to apply knowledge of validity and reliability to the selection and development of assessment. Defining validity. If your true weight was 180 pounds and the scale reported that you weigh 180 pounds, that is a valid measure of your weight. Another example, in the world of educational system, if you want to measure of students' ability to do long division, and the assessment actually measure the students' ability to do long division and not their ability to read word problems or speak English, that would be a valid measure. So what's actually validity based on your opinion? So validity refers to the accuracy of inferences drawn from an assessment. Yes, it is the degree to which the assessment measure what is intended to measure. We have defined validity broadly, but it's also helpful to have an understanding of various types of validity. First, we will talk about construct validity. Construct validity is what most people are referring to when they say validity. The construct is what you're trying to measure. For example, IQ test is intended to measure intelligence. Another example, you are attempting to measure the student's knowledge of the solar system. You don't want to actually be measuring their ability to read complex informational text, right? Another example is the most commonly an issue with regard to the breadth of standards addressed by an assessment. For example, if you administer an assessment that covers 3 standards, you cannot infer from those results whether or not students is proficient in the 7th grade mathematics, because that is not what you have access. So what is actually the construct validity? So when we talk about the construct validity, is it the assessment actually measure what is designed to measure? So A actually is A. We go to the next types of validity. Concurrent validity means that the assessment is correlated with other assessments that measure the same thing. For example, for a real world example, if your scale reports that you've lost 30 pounds, you would expect that your clothes would also feel looser, because the fit of your clothing is another assessment for your weight, right? Another example, you design a local mathematics assessment. Okay, you would expect scores to fairly closely parallel students' make grades. As students score highly and etc. So, concurrent validity is the assessment correlates with another assessment that measure the same construct. Okay, if they don't correlate, one or both of the assessment may not provide valid inferences. In this case, you would want to triangulate your assessment data by bringing in a third measure. This probably sounds like common sense, and in many ways it is. You must likely already intuitively understand and drawn upon this understanding that calling it concurrent validity. So it must be A correlates with B. So this is a concurrent validity. The next types of validity is predictive validity. Finally, if you want to use an assessment to predict students' performance on a future assessment, it needs to have predictive validity. Okay, let's say if you want to, when you were in high school and then you want to continue your degree in UIN Alauddin Makassar, then you take an exams like UMPTKIN, for example. It was designed and it is intended to be used to predict the freshman year grades, right, in your first year in higher education. Another example, twin-term assessment can sometimes be used to predict students' performance on summative assessment. Let's say after you take your exam in UMPTKIN, then you're not passed there, and then you take another exam. Okay, so predictive validity here means that A predicts B. This is a kind of types of validity. Okay, next topic we will talk about the valid inferences. Validity is closely tied to the purpose or use of an assessment. Okay, often we hear people questioning whether or not an assessment is valid. Okay, what they are really questioning is whether or not the inferences being made on the basis of the assessment are valid. For example, Imagine that you're trying to determine the students' proficiencies in Bugis. Okay, if you give them an assessment in Makassar, you would not be able to infer that they are or not provinces in Bugis. There is nothing wrong with the assessment itself, but it doesn't allow for the inferences that you are trying to make. So don't ask, is this assessment valid? But ask, are the inferences I'm making based on this assessment valid for my purpose? Evidence-centered design. It may be a bit tricky to wrap your head around that distinction. One way to bring it back is to remember that validity is really all about providing strong evidence for your claims about student learning. You may be heard the term evidence-centered design. What that means is that you start with your purpose, asking what do you want students to know and be able to do, what it is construct. Then you consider how you know if they know or can do that. What would it look like? Finally, you design an assessment around that. The form of the assessment should be follow the function is being asked to perform. Using this process will help ensure that the inferences made from an assessment are valid. For example, the driving test. Okay, the driving test. You want to know if a person knows the rules of the road and can drive safely. What would that look like? Well, they would be able to articulate the rules of the road and apply them as they actually drive around in a safe manner. So based on that, you may design a two-part assessment that asks them first, articulate the rules of the road, okay, aturan berlalu lintas, either orally or in writing. Okay, it can be orally or in writing. You give them the test, and the second part, drive around with you in the passenger seat. So validity is about providing strong evidence. Evidence-centered design was validity. What do you want to know? How would you know? What should the assessment look like? Okay, let's move forward to defining reliability. Reliability refers to the consistency and repeatability. Let's switch gears a bit to look about reliability, a term we use all the time. And really, its application in the world of educational assessment is not very different. A reliable car is one that you can count on to perform consistently, always turn around, road slide. For example, thermometer that fluctuates greatly within a few minutes, not reliable. A thermometer that always reports a temperature with 5 degrees higher than actual temperature, reliable. Okay, but not valid. So, a reliable assessment provides a consistent picture of what students know, understand, and are able to do. Another example, a reliable educational system will yield similar results if it is administered more than once to the same group of students. The student who score highly on the assessment the first time is likely to score highly the second and the third times. Okay, so we can see that there is a consistency there. There is a repeatability. Okay, next. Okay, you must remember here, an assessment that is highly reliable is not necessarily valid. Okay, remember, an assessment that is highly reliable is not necessarily valid. However, for an assessment to be valid, it must also be reliable. Good. Let's see here. Okay, let's see here. In this picture, describe that both reliable and valid. But here, let's see here. Yes, it's reliable because it's the same point here. Okay, there are 4 dots here, but it's consistently here, or it's tuned around there. It is reliable, but not valid. Tidak tepat. And the last figure is neither reliable nor valid. Yes, it is not reliable and it is not valid. Okay, forecasting and developing assessment. For example, you should have in mind the specific gaps that you want to fill. Okay, you must have a purpose, right? What are you trying to measure? For example, you need the diagnostic assessment for You need a diagnostic assessment for early literacy skills. Go back to the evidence-centered design. What do you want to know about what students know, understand, and can do? How would you know if they had not knowledge or skill? What should the assessment look like? Once you are clear on this, review the assessment that you already have in your assessment system to see if any can be used for this purpose, or if they can be supplemented if you have something for more limited purpose, right? If not, your choice is to either purchase a commercial assessment or create another one. Okay, so here, okay, you can see here, the first thing that you must have is the purpose. You should determine the purpose of your assessment, and then in the evidence-centered designs, right? So what do you want to know about students know, understand, can do? How would you know if they have a knowledge or skill, right? What should the assessment look like? Okay, and so there is a review here. Okay, and if necessary, consider the commercial assessment or create a new assessment. So it's easy enough to understand about the process, the system, okay, the system of this process of validity and reliability. Right. There's a consideration, right? Which the judges should have the considerations. Okay. So when we assess about the learning outcomes, for example, let's say you are the judges. Okay. So you should have a consideration here. Okay. For each of these options, there are some things to consider. If you are going to use something you already have, you have to think about whether it is carefully aligned to your purpose and that you are not just plugging something in that is closely aligned to what you are trying to assess. If you are purchasing a new assessment, again, you want to make sure that it's carefully aligned and not just affordable or high-tech. You may want to consider whether or not you have to fund purchase of the assessment, any equipment you might need to use it. Okay? And you should have to train your faculty on how to properly administer it. If you are developing a new assessment, you really want to think about your house capabilities, both in terms of content knowledge and assessment knowledge, right? Does the team have the time to do this properly and establish procedures for scoring the allows comparatively at counter scores? So let's see, using what you have, is it carefully aligned to your purpose? Okay. The second part, for the purchasing a new assessment, is it carefully met to your purpose? Do you have the fund for the assessment equipment and training? The developing a new assessment, do you have in the house content of knowledge, right? Do you have the in-house assessment of knowledge? Does your team have time for the development? Does your team have the knowledge and the time needed for the proper scoring? Because it's a long time anyway. You can't make a simple decision to develop one of the assessment that you have carried out from the beginning without the three parts here, the three considerations here. Okay, next. Okay, when advocating a new assessment, these are things that you should be looking for, and of course they are very helpful for guiding development and assessment that can be the basis of valid inferences about a student's achievement. When we say score reliability, we are talking about the consistency of scoring across various scores. Okay, essentially, would the students receive the same score regardless of who is scoring the assessment? If so, you have inter-rater reliability using score guides, common rubrics, or benchmarking student work abilities, as well as score norming exercises like reviewing sample of students' work and comparing the discussions. So it's a long way here. What makes high quality evidence for students' learning outcomes? Okay, students' learning objectives. Sorry. The talk we have been focused on the work with January and the district level. What we are talking about throughout the webinar is applicable to the work you're doing around the students' learning objectives. If you are at the district level, then okay, it's not our part here to explain about student learning objectives, just of validity and reliability. So we move forward. Okay, this is let's take a look an example here. Suppose that this was your objective. What would you be looking for as an evidence? You need evidence of reading, writing, and speaking boogies. Okay. Sorry here for the mismatch here. Including the accurate of use past and present tense. So students will demonstrate a great level of proficiency in reading, writing, and speaking boogies, including the accurate of use past and present tenses. So what would you do here? So probably you design the three pieces of evidence to assess each of the construct, read balance. This is really about ensure the ability to make valid inferences. Okay, first, write in final exam measuring reading comprehension, okay, vocabulary, conjugation, agreement, the past and present tenses. 300 writing composition in Bugis using the past and present tense is ahead in a family content term. 5 minutes conversation on the 3 selected topics using past and present tense.